presented by allaccessretail.com. Welcome to Conversations on Retail. Join Matt Fifer as he speaks with Dana Keilman and Nicole Munsey, co-founders of Morning Light Strategy, about why they believe that senior consumers are the shiny new thing. Let's get started.
All right. Good day, everyone. Welcome to Conversations on Retail. My name is Matt Fifer, and I'm joined today by Dana Keilman and Nicole Munsey, co-founders of Morning Light Strategy, an insights and advisory agency on a mission to help brands and organizations plan and position for the global shift toward an older demographic. I wanted to read that because I wanted to get it precisely right. Dana, you and I had a conversation, maybe it's been close to a month ago by now, and I was really intrigued when you talked about the work of your past and the work that you're doing now. But if I'm honest with you, I would tell you that the more time I have spent preparing for this conversation, the more fascinating I've become. And so I've really, really looked forward to this conversation. Thank you so much to both of you for making time to join me today.
Yeah. Thank you. We're looking forward to it too. Yeah.
So if you don't mind, I know the two of you have known each other for a long time. I mean, like close to 18 years, and your paths have crossed a number of times occupational, but sort of talk, each of you, about your professional background, the relationship you developed over the years, and when and why you decided to go out on your own and start this new company.
Sure. Nicole, you want me to start?
Sure.
Okay. We, at this point, we're probably even over 18 years. We should actually go back and calculate where we are. But you're right. We've known each other for a long time and have worked together in various different roles during that entire time. So my professional background, very similar to Nicole's, although she's done quite a few things, as well that are different from what I've done. But I was at a large global market research firm for about 25 years. And during that time, I did all kinds of different things. There was a lot of CPG focus, but also shopper and retail clients. And, we looked at a lot of different things in terms of understanding that shopper or that consumer and figuring out innovation. What are their needs? Where do we go from here? And no matter what we did, everybody was looking to grow their business. That's always the fundamental question. How can we grow our business? And as I continued along through my career, it just became more and more evident that various organizations, regardless of what industry they're in, they really were very much looking at a sweet spot of consumers somewhere around, 18 to 34 or so. Yeah. And they might go a little bit older in their research. They might go up to 45. They might go to 55. Sometimes they might go to 65. But they're not really interested in those consumers who are somewhere around 45 or older, certainly not 50 or older. And, you start to read and you learn more about what's going on demographically, not just in the US. There are a lot of countries, Asia, various countries, Japan, South Korea, a lot of countries in Western Europe that are well ahead of us in this demographic trend of an aging population. And you just start to put those two things together to say, wow, people are living longer, and there are a lot of needs associated with different life stages as you get to be 50. Certainly not an old age by any means, but it's something that introduces a lot of new experiences and life events. And with that, any kind of change introduces opportunities for businesses, and they just weren't paying attention to that or thinking about it. And so we, Nicole and I started talking at that point. But Nicole, let you introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, Nicole. As Dana mentioned, we worked together a number of years. I also spent, 10 years on and off at Ipsos, doing similar types of strategic research, from kind of foundational understanding of consumers to shopper journey and shopper insights, as well as on the innovation side. And then I've kind of veered off the Ipsos path a little bit, spent a little bit of time in syndicated research. And one of my most recent positions before this was with a European-based startup that was looking to expand in the US. So I helped them kind of get a toehold, get established in the market, and discovered that, while I really like the research side and the strategic analysis, I also like the building up a business part of it. So when Dana had this idea, I was very happy to jump on board.
Yeah, good stuff. for anyone who's listening now, I would encourage you to go ahead and pull up their website, morninglightstrategy.com, because there's a couple of things I want to point to on their site that I think are super, super good. The first one I want to talk about is, why the senior consumer is the shiny new thing. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Absolutely. So number of things we could say about them, but I kind of tend to boil it down into kind of three fundamental points. One, there's a lot of them, right? It's a huge segment. As it stands today in the US, there's about 120 million people that are age 50 plus, which, to put that in context, like how big is 120 million people? If that was its own country, it would be the 13th largest country in the world, right? Like, there are more people age 50 plus in the US than there are in all of Canada, right? There are only 40 million Canadians. So that's 3 times the size of the Canadian population, just for perspective. So it's a huge market that is largely overlooked. It's also a market that's growing, right? It's big now, but it's going to keep getting bigger over time, with falling birth rates, rising life expectancies. It's not just a boomer phenomenon by that generation. Like, right today, there's 120 million people age 50 plus. By 2050, there will be 160 million people that are age 50 plus. Meanwhile, that 18 to 34 demographic is basically going to stay flat throughout that whole time.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of them today. There's going to be more of them tomorrow. But also, it's where a lot of the economic opportunity is, right? Like, that group of people, the 50 plus in the US, accounts for over half of US consumer spending. And they have twice the spending power of the under 35 age group. And I think there's often misperceptions that they don't spend as much as, say, young families or Gen Z. But we found there's a number of categories, from cleaning supplies to pet products, food products, beverages to major appliances, where they're in fact spending more than the younger set. And oftentimes that's because they're more willing to buy premium. So kind of 3 points. There's a lot of them. There's going to be more of them, and they have all of the money.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned the boomer phenomenon. I was one who also believed that this was just sort of a temporary, like, glitch in the matrix, and that things would, after the boomers moved on, if you will. What a horrible thing to say, but things would level out again. But that's just not the case. We'll continue to age as a population. What are some other misconceptions about aging consumers?
I think actually you just touched on one, right? Because I think these days, across marketing insights, I think there's a bit of a misperception that 50 plus equals boomer. Like, I hear those words being used interchangeably as though anybody that turns 50 becomes a boomer. But the thing is, that's not true anymore, right? Gen X are over 50 now. I'm a millennial, and I'm only a few years from 50, right? So it's no longer boomers anymore.
Yeah, good stuff. So talk about some of the problems that you're working with organizations to solve. And before you do that, kind of talk about your sweet spot as a company, the kinds of organizations and brands that you would work with, and then the kinds of work that you're doing for them.
Mm-hmm. I can take that one. When we think about the kinds of organizations, just really, it's any organization that is interested in tapping into those opportunities offered by older adults. And so that's been something that's been really interesting. We launched in February officially. And since then, we have talked with and worked with CPG brands, retailers, agencies, and nonprofits as well. So, if we think about a service organization, for example, one of our clients is a Place for Mom, and we can talk about them. There's a press release that just came out with our work that we've done for them that ties into their ad campaign. So that's a good example of something that we're, helping them bring to life by understanding and what they do. I should just back up. A Place for Mom helps family caregivers as they're trying to investigate different senior living opportunities and see what is maybe right for the person that they're caring for. And so we just brought family caregivers to life. We help them understand, both from a qual and a quant perspective, what's going on in their lives, what their concerns are, what are the barriers to senior living, what's the daily reality of caregiving, and so on. And they were able to complement and use that information that we pulled in their current campaign called Because We Care. So it's, really helping people to understand whether it's older adults or it might be caregivers, really helping people to understand who these people are and what they care about, what their needs are, some of the emotions associated with that, so that when somebody is developing a new product or somebody is developing, it could be an ad campaign or just general messaging around what they're offering, it's something that can really create that connection and stand out for the audience.
Yeah. I alluded a moment ago to your website. And again, I would point people to it right now, morninglightstrategy.com. One of the things that I love, and not only did I see it on your site, but then I also heard you in another context speaking of it, is you've got a really interesting framework, sort of three pillars. And I know every situation is a little bit different, but talk us through that framework.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. You want me to take that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So our Future 50 growth framework is kind of how we structure everything that we do. And it's really based on there being what we see as 3 strategic pillars to accelerate growth among older adults. One of those pillars being understanding. And so that's research, solutions, insights that are all around getting that foundational understanding of the consumer, that baseline intelligence, but also creating organizational alignment. So we'll do a lot to kind of bring empathy and education to client organizations, whether that's through training or workshops to help them better understand, to get rid of some of those misperceptions about this consumer, or simply to kind of do a bit of an audit to understand, like, hey, how are we taking them into account if we are today in our marketing plans, in our insights, et cetera. And the second pillar is around innovation, whether that is kind of developing and launching something completely new for older adults and caregivers, or it could be taking existing things and seeing how to modify them for that population. And then the third pillar is all around communication. So working with clients and using insights to optimize advertising, marketing, retail strategies, and activations to make sure that we're reaching and resonating with that population.
Yeah. So I don't know if I would ask you, I would love to ask you, but I don't think I will ask you to name names when it comes to brands that are like really getting it wrong. But maybe you can be thinking about some things that you've seen in the marketplace without naming names, like, man, this really, really misses the mark. And the opposite of that question, what are some brands that you think are really doing a great job? And feel free to name names, there if you'd like.
Yeah.
Do you want me to take the bad ones and you can take the good ones?
Just going to say, we've talked about some of this. Nicole has some good examples.
Yeah. So without naming names, I think kind of one of the biggest problems that we see in advertising is the way that older consumers are portrayed, right? It often tends to be very reinforced stereotypes that they're outdated, that they're home alone, they're low tech, et cetera. So you tend to see a lot of those stereotypes enforced in advertising today. And some of that's getting a little bit better, but it's definitely still out there. I think the other thing that always, one of the things that really pushes my buttons is I often tend to see, especially this time of year, you tend to see a lot more of those sorts of holiday commercials. And typically I feel like when older people are featured in those, it's often a sort of pull your heartstrings thing that's, kind of sad old person needs to be cheered up at the holidays. But in reality, one, that's very stereotypical, and two, that's not even talking to the older people, right? Like you're using the older person as a foil to tug at the heartstrings of younger people.
Yeah, that's just reinforcing what Nicole said. Often they're used as, it might be a comedic foil or a tug at your heartstrings foil in advertising. And they, if you think about the way that most effective advertising really works, it's to create that connection with people. And people want to be seen the way that they see themselves. And we know that older people generally, you've heard about, the smile of the happiness curve, where it's the youngest portion of the population that tends to be very happy, but also the older population, older adults. And that's really true. They're not generally seeing themselves as sad, pathetic people in need of help. They see themselves as engaged and independent and active contributors who love to continue learning. And yes, there might be some mobility issues by the time you get to a certain age, but that is not, their age is not the most interesting thing about them.
Yeah.
And so,
I told Dana, I told you this on our initial conversation. My parents are in their mid-70s, and they run and work circles around me. I mean, they're never at home. They're always on the go. They're always trying something new. A couple months ago, they're like, "Oh, we want to start dehydrating food." Like, well, of course you do. I mean, they've got money to spend, and they're super curious and adventurous, and they just want to go out with a bang. They want to finish life strong. So I love that about them. So the flip of the question: what are some brands and organizations that are really getting it right?
Yeah. There's one that we've read about that it's actually a Dutch retailer, and such an interesting idea. This is a program they introduced a few years ago. The retailer's name is Jumbo, and they have created a slow checkout lane. And the purpose of it is for somebody, and it was created for seniors. But the way that it's worked out is anyone who just doesn't want to rush quite so much, and the point of it is you have time with the cashier, you can chat, and over time you develop that routine. You keep coming back to the store, when you're the cashier that you've made a connection with is working, and you had that chat, and the expectation is that is a slow checkout lane. So I love that for many reasons. One, it's popular, it has proven to be effective, but it's really, from an innovation standpoint, it's really looking at universal design with a very different starting point. And that's something Nicole and I talk about a lot is, what if you were to say, if a company's sweet spot, maybe 18 to 34-year-olds, and maybe they really do want to stick with that, but what's the harm in starting innovation from another perspective? Start innovation from the perspective of an older adult and see how then you may attract others of all ages through universal design, because it really taps into a need. But there are a couple of other examples too that I would give you. CVS did a big study several years ago, and we weren't involved in it, but it's detailed in a book called The Longevity Economy by Joe Coughlin, which I would recommend for anyone to read. And it's just, I won't go into all the detail because I could really go on for a while about it, but it's fascinating. And again, from the aspect of universal design, a lot of what they did is applicable to so many people. It makes life easier for others too. So they watched shoppers go through the store, and how did older people navigate the store? What were the difficulties? What were points of confusion? And so as a result, some of the things that they did, I mean, they did make a lot of changes, but some of them, typically they had the heaviest items at, maybe it's a 2-liter of soda, or it could be a 6-pack of Ensure, any of that, typically on the bottom shelf, partly for safety reasons. But what that means is the physical act of bending over and lifting it up is difficult for a lot of people, not just older people. So they kind of put it into the middle of the shelf. They created grocery carts that were a little more shallow, so you didn't have to reach all the way down into it. They broke the aisles up for various reasons. But if you think about it, what that does is it allows that person to then navigate through the store more quickly, as opposed to going all the way up and down the aisles. So then they're more, especially if you have mobility issues, you're more encouraged to go to different areas of the store rather than just going in to get what you need and then making that long trek back to the cash register. So there were a lot more things they did as well. And I'll just give you one last one. In Japan, which I think is just such an interesting example of a country that is far ahead of us in this demographic trend. I'll just, for one, kind of to bring that trend to life, it was about 11 years ago in Japan, adult diapers for adult incontinence started to outsell baby diapers. So, it just gives you kind of a tangible example of what happens. But one other thing that Japan started doing, in Japan, the bigger cities, they've got corner stores. And so on every corner, at a 4-way intersection, you're going to have 4 different corner stores. So they're really competing for business. And they started offering free coffee to anyone over 65. And then they would put out a table and a couple of chairs. So they're really encouraging older adults to come into the store. And that was one of the competitive advantages to get people into the store once they realized that, hey, you know what? We've got this growing part of the population and we need to start attracting them. We need to stand out to them.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about low-hanging fruit. Are you seeing any commonality as you engage with these organizations where more than not are like missing out on this one thing that you consider super fundamental?
I would say, and I'm curious to know what Nicole would say too, but I really do think it's the way that they're either excluded from communications and advertising or they're portrayed. So I do think that new product development should focus much more, or it may not even need to be a brand new product, but just an iteration or a version of an existing product. But I think the lower hanging fruit is just understand them, understand how they see themselves, understand how they want to be seen, to connect with them as a consumer who's meaningful.
Yeah.
I tend to agree. I guess the one other build I would say is, while we obviously advocate, for brands and organizations and retailers to be focusing on the older consumer, that said, it's not necessarily, we don't mean at the expense of other targets, right? Like it's very much an and, not an or. And so we've done actually some work with different clients, looking at like, what are the ways in which you can communicate various points that will resonate with both like Gen Z and with boomers, for instance. So I think there could be a misperception sometimes that if you try to target or market to older consumers, you're inevitably going to be alienating younger consumers, and that's not the case. So sometimes the lowest hanging fruit is simply just to include them, right? Include them in research studies. Don't cut off at age 50 when you're doing research and development.
Yeah. Again, I'm speaking with Dana Keilman and Nicole Munsey, co-founders of Morning Light Strategy. So one other question I have for you is, obviously organizations would approach you at all kinds of places, I guess. I mean, maybe they've identified a problem, maybe they want to get ahead of it. What's your preference? I mean, if you could just do the work that you love to do the most, would you prefer to have a relationship with an organization that is allowed to contribute even before an initiative kicks off? Do you prefer to evaluate what's already in place, or do you kind of like coming in and cleaning up messes?
I don't know if I have a preference. I do think though that the right starting point for a lot of organizations, maybe all, but that's a sweeping statement. But
Sure.
For most organizations, they really should start by understanding older adults. So kind of that first portion of our framework. I mean, that's critical to then understand what to do in either of the other two phases with innovation and communication.
Yeah. I mean, gaining understanding is something that should precede everything else, right? I mean, because it has such deeper implications than one specific initiative.
Yeah,
absolutely. So I think, this, starting with kind of that foundational learning, which, like I said, can be a mix of both, standard kind of research and consumer understanding, but some of it in that understand phase is really understanding the organization too, right? Taking a look through what are the kind of the current practices in terms of, marketing plans, ad spends, media buys, insights programs, like how, if at all, are you including older consumers? Where are they coming to play? Like kind of like where are the holes, and almost, a bit of a report card on how are you doing now, and to identify where those low hanging fruit are. And then identify where there could be strategic opportunities and looking at which ones kind of fit with, the organization overall and the overall strategy. And then from there, you probably move into innovation or communication.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I would emphasize what Nicole said before. It really is an and, not an or necessarily, where there's so many things. If we look at Gen Z, and we've done this research, look at Gen Z, look at boomers, as we look at two, opposite generations kind of, or people think of them as opposites. There are so many commonalities. There are so many just human needs that transcend generation. But when you can articulate that and you can demonstrate that in your communication in a way that really appeals to a lot of different people, as opposed to only focusing on Gen Z. Yeah.
Sure. I'll give you the last word in a moment. But as we wrap up, my guess is the best way for anyone to engage with you and your team is to start with your website, which by the way, it's a great website. It tells the story well. It really tells what you're about and frames up the opportunity nicely. So, check out morninglightstrategy.com and contact form. I'm guessing that's probably the very best place to start. But give us some closing thoughts, sort of reinforcing the importance of this consumer segment and why, if you've not prioritized them, you ought to be.
I would say, just nobody knows what they don't know. So just start by understanding what they can bring to you and your business. Understand the new ideas that they can help you to generate and explore. At least start with that. Don't look at a group of consumers and say, yeah, they're just not relevant to me. There are going to be very few companies for whom that's true. So definitely take the time to explore them, take the time to focus on them, and definitely just talk to us, talk to Nicole, talk to me, and we can help you figure out the right starting point and what questions you may want to ask, or maybe what your blind spots are for an organization.
Yeah, and I would say, the bottom line, our tagline is "The future is old." So it's whether this is an area you focus on now or not, or think you don't have to. At the end of the day, everybody does, because that is the future. These demographic trends are changing. And obviously the brands and retailers that kind of figure that out sooner than later are going to be in better shape in the long term.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I'm really excited about the work that both of you are doing. I think that there is absolutely an audience within our listening community. I would love to circle back and dig a little bit deeper with some of the work that you've done and dig more into your framework and dig more into the recent white paper, which I think is outstanding. But congratulations to both of you for your success to now, and certainly that you're already having in your startup together. Congratulations on that, and best of luck going forward. Again, Dana Keilman, Nicole Munsey, co-founders of Morning Light Strategy. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure getting to know the both of you, and I look forward to speaking again soon.
Great.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Have a great day.
You too.
Okay, you too.